Hello, welcome back, good people. We are continuing with our sensitivity analysis, understanding using advanced Excel. And I was able to come up with a question here to help us understand deeply about the sensitivity analysis tools, which is under what if analysis. On your Excel window, if you go and click on the data tab, you are able to see what if analysis under forecast section. And under what if analysis, we had discussed and I had shown you that we have three major tools. We have scenario manager, we have goal seek, and we have data table. Now, in this question, which is a pilot paper, December 2022, question 23, that is under BDA. So I was using this question specifically to help us gain more understanding of these concepts. Now, we had discussed about a goal seek, and if you look at the question, if you are new and you are not able to maybe recapture what you already did, kindly go through the videos that I posted before on the same. You'll be able to understand how I used goal seek, how we used goal seek to get the minimum value of X, right? You'll be able to understand that. Now, we also went ahead and used one-tail data table to be able to come up with NPVs when you vary the discount rates between 10% and 15%. If you've forgotten the concept, kindly go back and review so that you'll be able to understand how that tool is powerful and how it's being applied. Good. Now, today, I would want us to do something different. I would want us to go ahead and look at the third analysis tools, the third sensitivity analysis tool, and that is Scenario Manager. Now, from the name Scenario Manager, this is a tool that will now go ahead and do functionalities that cannot be done by GoalSeek and cannot be done by data table. You remember we have two types of data table. We have one variable data table or one tail data table. Then we also have two variable data table or two tail data table. Now, the difference is the number of variables that will change at any particular point in time. If you are changing one variable at a particular time, then that's how we are using, that's when we are using one tail data table. And in our question here, Roman 2, we used one tail data table because it is only discount rate that is varying, that is changing. Yeah, so that's why you are able to use it. I also went ahead and told you I'm going to come up with another question where we can be varying two variables at the same time. And data table can also handle where we are varying two variables at the same time so that we be able to see how that variable change, or when the two variables change, how it will impact on the output in that case. Now, I want us to go to the next tool, that is the scenario manager. Now, how do we use scenario manager? I want us to refer to what we already did before. If you look at our variables here, we have the initial investment, we have cash flow, and let's read Roman 3 so that we understand it best. Assume that you have three project scenarios as outlined below, and we have the scenarios 1, 2, and 3. We have the discount rate. You can see the discount rates are different. We have initial costs. You can see they are varying. They are not the same. We have starting cash flows. They also vary across. We have initial cash flow, and that one also, the growth rate in initial cash flows, they are also varying across the three scenarios. Now, we are required to prepare a detailed outcome of the project under each of the above scenarios. How do you go about this? Now, I want to show you how we're using Scenario Manager. Now, in our Scenario Manager, we want to ask ourselves, which variables are we changing? Which cells are we changing? Now, before we go to the Scenario Manager tab, which is here, right here, before we come to that Scenario Manager tab, I would want us to take advantage of another tool which is provided by Excel so that we can name our cells. We can give reference and name our cells before we can start. Now, we want to look at the changing variables. And the changing variables you've seen, we have the discount rate, initial cost, starting cash flow, and then the growth rate. So in our tabulation, in part A, Roman 1 above, which we already did using GoalSeek, these are the same variables that are changing. And this, we are going to treat whatever variables we had in part A above as our base case scenario. And I would want us to name the cells. the changing variables. Now, how do we name the changing variables? I would want us to come here and highlight the name of the variable and the value, the cell that has their values. Then we come to the formulas tab on your Excel window. Go and click on the formulas tab. There are so many things you will see there, but do not worry. I would want us to concentrate on naming the cells from the selection. And I would want you to pinpoint where we are defining names. Come here under the name manager, we are defining names, but specifically go to create from selection. So come and create from selection. And even before I click on it, if you just put your cursor there, you will see a brief description of what you're about to do. You're being told this one automatically generates names from the selected cells. So we are naming our cells. This will help us in the scenario manager so that we know the name of the cell, the name of the variable that we are varying at each particular point in time. Good. So come here and click on create from selection. Once you've done that, you'll see there is a pop-up window which is asking you to create names from values in. Now, we have top row, left column, bottom row, and right column. I would want you to click on the left column. Yeah, that is where the names are, the names of the variables. Yeah, so just make sure you check on that left column, then you confirm by saying okay. Now, once you've done that, so we are being told to replace the existing definition. I already did some definitions using the same, Excel sheet, but that's not a problem. I'll just go ahead and say, okay, replace the naming that was already done. Now, if you come after doing that, if you click on any of these variables, you will not be given the cell reference. You'll be given now a name that you've already defined. So if I click on this 10 million, was it 10 million, our initial investment? Yes. If I click on it, I will not see cell I3. I will see initial investment. Are you seeing this box here, the name box? Good. If I click on the cash flow here, I will not see the cell reference as I4. I will see the name cash flow in year one. I will see this one also, the growth rate. If I click on it, it will show me that that is growth rate because I've named that cell. You get that? Good. Now, the other important variable or the output that we are looking at, you see the required is detailed outcome. Our outcome is NPV. What is the effect of changing these variables at the same time? Therefore, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are 4 variables changing at the same time. And when they're changing at the same time, the effect, we are going to see the effect on the NPV. So NPV is our output. We also need to name the cell where NPV is. Now, I would want us to come here. You see we have NPV and this is how we got the NPV. If you've forgotten again, please go back to the previous videos so that you'll be able to understand. Good. So because we already have a functionality in Excel of NPV, I do not want to leave it at NPV. I'll just say, NPV, 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 let me just call it NPV result, something like that. Because you already have a functionality in Excel called NPV, so you cannot also rename it again because it will conflict with the functionality which is already programmed in Excel. So come here, highlight NPV and the cell where the output is. Go to the formulas tab. Again, we want to name it. We want to name it from that selection. Create from selection, the left column, confirm. Now, if I click on this cell where NPV output is, I will not see the cell reference of I24, but I will see NPV result. Are you seeing that? Interesting. So after we've done that, I would want us to come and now go to the scenario manager. How do we do the scenario manager? We have how many scenarios? We have 3 scenarios which we've been given here. And you can see scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3. That is the scenarios we have. So these scenarios, I want us to use the one we already used above as our base case scenario. Come to the data tab, go to what if analysis, click on the scenario manager. Once you've done that, you can see we do not have any scenario. And I want now to start by adding the scenarios. Go and click on the tab written add. So I will add. What is the scenario name? I will call it base because it is our base case scenario. We can call it default or base. So I will choose base. Then the changing cells. We have now to choose the changing cells. Now, my changing cells are initial investment, As you can see here, we have discount rate, initial investment, cash flow in year one, then growth rate. These are the changing cells in the scenarios given. So I will come again and highlight the changing cells. The changing cells, we have initial investment, cash flow, growth rate. Yeah. And then discount rate is also a changing cell. So I need also to bring discount rate somewhere here. Yeah. I need to bring discount rate. I need to bring discount rate. And my discount rate, I wrote it here. So in fact, I just need to move it and bring it there like that. So those are the changing cells. So I will go back again, click on what if analysis scenario manager. I'm adding the first base case scenario, which is the base. Then I will choose changing cells, which is initial investment, cash flow, growth rate, and then cost of capital. But now, remember, I named my cells before I brought in the cost of capital. So I need also to rename it again so that it can also pick the name of cost of capital, which I've just brought in here. So I'll go to my formulas tab, create from selection. I will name them like that. After I've done that, I go back to my scenario manager like that. I want to do base case scenario. Changing cells, I've already defined the names, so I will just select them. After that, just click on OK and you'll see the initial outputs. Now, the reason why we were defining the names, we were naming the cells, you can see the output here. You can see we are being given initial investment, cash flow in year one, growth rate, and cost of capital. So it is easier for us to manipulate and change the figures for each scenario. So this is the default scenario. Initial investment was 10 million. You can see it here. Cash flow in year one, we already got it as 1209. You can see it there. Growth rate is 10%. You can see that is the default. Then cost of capital is 15%. You can see it. That is the default. So I will just say, okay, that is scenario number one, which is the best case scenario. That is the best case scenario. So I will go ahead and now start doing my scenarios from scenario one as we move forward, So I want just to scroll it there so that it can be visible for us, it can be visible. We already have our base case. So I will go ahead and start from scenario one, scenario two, scenario three. I will add a scenario. What is the name of the scenario? That is the scenario one. Then changing cells, do not change the changing cells again. You already selected the changing cells. You do not have to click on that. Just come and confirm by saying okay, like that. Now, initial investment under scenario one, you can see our initial cost is the same 10 million. Cash flow in year one now is changing. Starting cash flow is now 1.5 million. Now, that is what I'm coming here to change. 1.5 million. Growth rate, you can see growth rate is the same 10% which was in our base case scenario. So I'm not going to change that. Cost of capital now, if I come here, you can see discount rate is still 15%. What has changed is just the cash flow in year one, which is now 1.5. Yeah. What did I write? I wrote 1.15. I think, yeah, 1.5, it's okay. So that is the only thing that is changing under scenario one. So I will just say, okay. I've already added my scenario one. I will come to scenario two. I will say add, then I name it scenario two. Scenario two like that. Do not click on the changing cells. We already set it before. We do not have to interfere with it. Just come and confirm by clicking OK. Then we change the values. Under scenario two, initial investment now is 15 million. So I will just come and change the 10 million to 15 million. Then cash flow in year one, starting cash flow is now not 1.5, which was in scenario one, but now it is 2 million. So I will just come here and change my starting cash flow to be 2 million, like that. Then let's look at the growth rate in scenario two. You can see now growth rate is 8%. So 8%, when we convert it to decimals, it will be 0.08, like that. Cost of capital. What is the cost of capital under scenario two? You can see it is 10%. So 10% is 0.1. So I will, after changing those figures, I will just say okay, and my scenario two is already here. So we have base case scenario, scenario one, and scenario two. Now let's add the third scenario. I will just click on add tab, then I will call it scenario three, like that. Changing cells, we are not touching on that. Just confirm by saying okay, then we change the scenario values. Now, the scenario values, let's look at the starting cash flow under scenario 3, and you can see there it is now 4 million. Yeah, it is now 4 million, like that. Then, no, sorry, what did I pick? Initial cost, I should pick on initial cost, which is 20 million. 20 million. Then, cash flow, the starting cash flow is where now we have the 4 million. The 4 million, how many zeros are those? Yeah, it's okay. So growth rate, let's look at growth rate in scenario 3. I can see it is 7%. 7% in decimals will be 0.07. Then cost of capital, I can see it is 13, which is 0.13. Good. After doing that, you've already put in all the scenario values for scenario number 3, and then confirm by saying okay. So up to that point, guys, we already have all the scenarios given, but we already have our base case scenario also there. Base case scenario is the reference point. These are the scenario 1, scenario 2, and scenario 3. These are where now the variables are changing away from what we have as default figures, which we worked with in part A above. So up to this point, just now, the reason why scenario manager is able to manipulate and give you outputs for all the 3 variables, the 4 variables we have at the same time, the output, you can always get the output if you select on any of the scenarios. Now, this is the best case scenario. I can ask Excel to show me figures for the best case scenario. Best case scenario, our NPV was 0. Now, let's look at the change in NPV, where now you are changing the values. And you can see under scenario 1, now discount rate still remains the same as the one in base case. Initial cost remains the same as the one in base case. Starting cash flow is where now the difference starts. Starting cash flow under base case was 1.2 million. Remember what we did? 1.2 million, the value of X which we got. Now, because it has changed to now this 1.5, we expect this NPV to be different. So I want to show you the results under scenario 1, and you'll see, I want you to look at this point. You'll see how the NPV is reflecting that change in that variable. Of course, growth rate still remains 10%, which is the same as in our base case. So if I show the values or the result under scenario 1, you should be able to pinpoint how. I want you to look at the NPV cell so that you see the NPV figure will change. Now, I want to say show. Have you seen what has happened? My NPV has changed to reflect the output where now the variable is changing. Which variable is changing? My starting cash flow has changed to 1.5 million from 1.2 million, which was in best case. That's why we are seeing the effect on NPV. It has changed. I will go to scenario 2, where now these other variables are also changing. In scenario 2, discount rate is changing from 15 to 10. Initial cost is changing from 10 to 15. Starting cash flow is also changing from 1.5 to 2 million. Growth rate is also changing from 10% to 8%. So all the 4 variables are changing at the same time, right? Now, let's see the output, the result here. I want you to look at the same NPV cell and see how it is going to change under scenario 2. So I've clicked on scenario 2. You can see the blue marking in scenario 2. Good. So I will come here and say show. Are you seeing how it is changing down there? Let me just put it here. Are you seeing our NPV is now 6.8 million? If I do the same to scenario 3, that 6.8 million is still also going to change. Let me say show. If I click on show, are you seeing it has come to 16 million? So that is how changing these variables will affect the result, which in this case our NPV. Now, I want to get the summary output for all this, where we are going to get the range, the NPV figures, and it will give us an output which the examiner is going to mark. Because the examiner will not try testing these variables one by one like that. No. You need to get an output. How do you get an output? Now, after putting in your scenarios like that, come to summary and click on summary. You will get that output. Yeah, I want to click on the output cell where I want my answers to come. I want to just choose here, result cell. Yeah, and the result cell, let me just result cell, Let me see, scenario pivot table report. No, we are not going there at this point in time. Scenario summary. Let me just click the scenario, the result cells. I want it to give me a result of NPV. Let me just choose NPV because that is the result that I'm looking at here. So let me just say, okay. When I do that, it is working in the background, and there you go. We have the output. Now you see the summary scenario output is here. And that's where it's giving us best case scenario, NPV was 0. Scenario 1, NPV was 2.4 million. In scenario 2, NPV is 6.8. In scenario 3, NPV is 16 million. And this is how you use the scenario manager. See you in the next one. We are going to look at a case where we are using two-tail data table. I'm going to come up with a question that will help us understand this. This is how you apply scenario manager, and it will give you outputs where various variables are changing at the same time, more than two variables. See you in the next one.